Good afternoon. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. We have a...
Your kitty cat says someone is trying to call you.
Oh, hold on a second. Hold on.
Kitty says hurry up and answer.
Okay. Well, like last night, apparently I have this producer, director, creative spirit named Basil Budacat, and he's demanding that I put a plug in for his show because apparently, even though he's only been on Comcast for 5 years, and I've been on Progressive Soup's been on for 8 years, he has this claim that somehow or other he got me my gig. So, okay, Basil Budacat, and his tagline is "Screw Fox News, here comes cat news." The show is Basil Budacat Presents! Exclamation point. On YouTube, Kristen40, Kristin40. On Facebook, Basil Budacat, and that's Buddacat. And on Catbook, whenever cats take over Facebook. Okay. You satisfied? You said, maybe. So we're back with Mike DeRosa. And I'll let Mike reintroduce himself, and we're going to start talking about this state bank again, because that's intriguing. But go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Yeah, I'm Mike DeRosa. I'm the co-chair of the Connecticut Green Party. I ran for Congress in the last election in the 1st Congressional District and did pretty well. Got 2.1% of the vote, 6,600 votes. A lot of people voted in this election, so our numbers were where they were. Jill Stein got about 1.5% of the vote here in Connecticut. Mm-hmm. Our senatorial candidate, all of our 26 candidates got all ballot access, so we're all set for the future.
Nice.
Which is very important in the state of Connecticut because ballot access is one of the ways that they stop third parties from continuing to develop.
And I'm going to quiz myself on that because you've been on explaining that to me before, and I see if I remember it correctly. The two major parties have basically carte blanche. They're on the ballot no matter what. They don't have to do anything. But apparently the Green Party and any other third party has to produce a very significant number of voter signatures in order to get on the ballot. And it's not a small number. The number I don't remember, could you?
It's 7,500 valid signatures for president, for governor, mm-hmm. for all the major offices, but you have to collect for every position individually, which in some states you have some bar. For example, you get 1% for any statewide office. You get ballot access across the board. But in Connecticut, every single office you run for, you have to collect signatures for.
Oh, so autonomous. One's autonomous from the other one.
Right. In this case, we got Jill on by we collected 8,400 signatures through our paid people, through Jill's small resources that she had this year, and which was about $30,000 to $40,000 she spent to get those. And then the other 8,400 signatures we got from our volunteer base. So we ended up with 16,800 signatures approximately. Mm-hmm. And, we needed 7,500. We needed every single one because the town clerks throw names off willy-nilly with no particular reason. Right. Perhaps the person moved, perhaps they can't read it, perhaps they just decided that they didn't want the Green Party on the ballot. There's all sorts of reasons.
I'll vouch for that because I did go out and I did help collect signatures for Jill Stein.
Well, thank you.
And took them to a local town, whose shall go nameless, Brookfield. And they did throw a couple of the names off because they couldn't read them.
Right.
The signatures and the writing weren't clear enough, even though I looked at it and said, well, that says ba 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 ba. They still decided
that was my experience also.
Yes. They couldn't read them, so sorry, you're out of luck.
So we ended up electing 2 registrar voters, and we also have 29 justices of the peace as of today.
Nice.
And that's important because on the back of the form you have to swear that you collected these signatures, and it has to be notarized. So I had the point is that notarization is part of the person collecting the signature. They have to swear that they collected the signatures themselves. Now, we had an interesting lawsuit the Libertarians put forward back in February of last year.
Yeah.
And that was very helpful for out-of-state petitioners could come in. We excluded out-of-staters. Janet Hall, federal judge Janet Hall said that this was chilling free speech, and she remanded the state to change the law and put an injunction on them.
So you used to have strictly Connecticut registered
right.
voters collecting signatures, and the ruling was that folks could come in as volunteers from out of state and help collect signatures.
They couldn't up until this case.
Okay.
So there's 4 states in the United States that have this rule. New Jersey, New York, Connecticut was overturned, and sometimes South Dakota. But that's another story.
Yeah.
So it shows how far back we are. And as Mr. Louis, who is the head of the Political Science Association of the United States, said about 15 years ago, the two parties are on life support, but they have 2 things keeping them alive: a whole lot of money, like billions, and control over ballot access. And I think he's correct. I think this is the reason why we don't have a serious multi-party system. For example, there was a gentleman named Bernie, remember him?
Oh, yeah.
He ran, and there's all these problems with his campaign. You know, for example, in Brooklyn, where he was born, over 100,000 people got disenfranchised. Their registration suddenly disappeared. Democrats became Republicans, or they became independents. They couldn't get a ballot. And that was one of the problems.
Yeah,
In California.
Yeah, just in Brooklyn, 100,000 people went to the polls, and they were advised that, oh, you're not on the list anymore. And we tried to reach you,
Right.
which they may or may not have done, to confirm that you still live where you lived in Brooklyn, and 100,000 of those are gone with a puff of smoke.
If you believe that, there's a bridge in Brooklyn I want to sell you. But anyway,
How much you asking?
Well, I don't know. It depends. It's on a variable rate.
And how much can I leverage it and resell it?
Right, exactly. The other problem, as I see it, is procedural democracy. We need proportional representation. The winner-take-all system is really not democracy.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of proposals out here, instant runoff voting, a variety of other things. But I think proportional representation, like in Germany in the Bundestag, the Green Party usually gets about 7% of the vote there.
Yep.
But half of the seats in the Bundestag are done by district. Half of them are done by percentage of vote, total vote. So we usually end up, the Greens in Germany get 3.5% of the folks in the Bundestag, because we always get about 7% of the vote there. There's an interesting election in the Netherlands going on.
Not exactly like the United States with their Congress, where how many Greens are there in Congress?
Well, we did have Bonnie Troy almost win a seat here in Western Connecticut. She got 42% of the vote. So that was pretty interesting. So we're getting closer and closer. I think what's got to happen is people got to realize that Trump is, you know, really an authoritarian, and the Democrats have become Republicans. And once you understand that, then you begin to understand the need, the desire, and the importance of having third-party politics. And I'm, you know, an advocate not just for green power in our legislatures, because we're bringing new ideas, like we talked about the state bank. We're bringing new ideas to the table that right now are not allowed to be heard. Unfortunately, the Banking Committee rejected our bill, which was simply a study to see if we could save the state of Connecticut $1 billion the first year going to a state bank, $1.5 billion the second year, and $1.8 billion the third year. And these savings would come in a variety of different ways. I mean, the bank could be structured. All we wanted to do was study it to see if our contention was correct. The Fed doesn't like this.
Okay, there's something that I thought about in between shows, in between last night's show and today's show. And I believe that the Bank of America, as it handles all of Connecticut's finances, if you've got to go on unemployment for whatever reason, for a period of time, Bank of America is not giving you a check or a direct deposit into your account generally. What they try to do is they try to give you a plastic card that you use as a debit card for purchases. Now, if you've ever gotten a debit card before, if you've ever gotten the card at Dunkin' Donuts, a $25 card, you get down to the end of that card and there's 50 cents left of that $25, you throw it out. Well, this is what's happening with the unemployment cards. Once you're down under a certain amount, you can't buy anything for that amount anyway. So that's free money for Bank of America.
Absolutely, and there are many other ways. Essentially what we're doing is we're taking a liability, our budget, and turning it into an asset. That's the key of it. And there's nothing magic about making money. Money makes money. And when you're in the banking business, you know that you can leverage money in ways that are both legal and questionable. And I'm not anti-bank, and I'm not anti-having banks in existence. I think that we have to have public banking. That's part of our Green New Deal, which includes, democratizing our institutions and making them sustainable, and then they work, maybe making sure that they work for Main Street and not for Wall Street. Now, a lot of people are upset about Wall Street, but there's not a lot you can do about it. We've gone through essentially a depression in 2007, 2008. We had millions of people thrown out of work. 5 or 6 million people lost their homes. Many of these homes are now being eaten up by groups like Blackstone Incorporated. They refurbish them, they sell them. All we're doing is this is a giant merry-go-round for the 1%. And the analysis of the Occupy movement, that was the genius. It changed the paradigm. It said to people, there's somebody called the 1%, and then there's a 99%. It's probably 2%, but it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it's a high concentration of power.
Half the wealth in America is in a very small number of hands, and that's not to say people that have small hands, because that's a whole that's a whole nother joke.
But,
the orange hair and the small hands.
You have to give credit to Donald Trump. During the campaign, he said, why vote for these interlopers? The Clintons, the Bushes, these other people, when you can get the real thing. Why have I'm a billionaire. Why not vote for me? And I think the appeal that he had is very similar to what right-wing movements in the past have done. What they do is they raise leftist issues to middle-class and lower-middle-class people and the poor, and they say, well, look, I made it. I'm going to be on your side because I have no strings attached. Well, look at the people he's appointed to his cabinet.
They cleared the swamp. He drained the swamp, didn't he?
No, he drained the swamp, but then he put the swamp back in place, So it is kind of a magic trick. And he's a distractor. He goes over here, he does this, and then he does something else over here. Now, my point of view is, when you're voting for the lesser of the two evils, how do you determine which is the lesser of the two evils? And, a lot of people criticize us because they're looking for a scapegoat. What Machiavelli said, create more scapegoats. That's how you control the people. And part of what they're doing here is creating what Trump has created is a bunch of scapegoats. It's Mexicans, that's why you don't have a job. It's these Muslims who are coming over here to create terrorist acts. It's blacks, or it's other brown people that are the problem. And he goes on and on and on. There isn't anybody who is not, a scapegoat.
Interesting side note to that, because, of course, for many, many decades, into a century and probably more than that, poor whites were fed the line, well, those blacks are after your jobs. You got to keep them in place, because otherwise they'll take your jobs.
Right.
And then they came along and told the blacks, they tried to pull the same scam on the blacks. They said, well, those Mexicans are coming along and taking your jobs. And the black community basically, they rubbed their chin and they said, I think we've heard that scapegoating before, except last time we heard it, it was us being scapegoated.
Right.
So now that we're hearing Mexicans and other immigrants being scapegoated, we're not falling for that junk. And they didn't.
Right. And I think, this is nothing new. This has been going on for many, many years. They're coming after your Social Security. They're coming after your Medicare. Right now, they're coming after Obamacare. I wanted to mention a couple of things here, which I thought this is Sunday's New York Times front page here. Would be, I guess,
Well,
March 12th.
That's fake news, right?
Well, we know that, but once in a while something sneaks through,
Okay.
According to someone who looks at this issue in terms of Standard & Poor's, 6 to 10 million Americans will lose their health care because of the Repeal, Stabilization, and Replacement Act of our very famous person named Paul Ryan. And then the Brookings Institute thinks 15 million will lose their health care. Now, let's take a look at Paul Ryan. When Paul was 16 years old, he's the Speaker of the House, U.S. House. Tragically, his dad had a massive heart attack and died. And what happened was that his mom got survivor benefits, and he took money from that he would get through the survivor benefits, and he put it away and used it to go to Miami University in Ohio, which is a state institution. So he essentially got a free education because of Social Security benefits. His grandmother moved into the house. She had Alzheimer's. And Mom went to school to become an interior decorator. Much of this was because of Social Security. They had some money. They had a construction company and equipment that they either rented or somehow leased out to people. So, Paul was always in the public trough. He was getting money when he was a senatorial aide. His whole life is attached to the public trough. And yet, even though Social Security helped him in his moment of tragedy, he now wants to do away with Social Security and Medicare. As a recipient of Social Security and Medicare, I am outraged by this.
Interesting use of the word trough. So, if I get you correctly on this, Paul Ryan, his family was at the public trough, taking advantage of the largesse from we taxpayers.
Well, like George Orwell, his famous Animal Farm, the pigs always get all of the resources and the people get, a hearty handshake. This is...
but a very hearty handshake.
Very hearty handshake. So, the key to understanding, we live in Orwellian times, war is peace, ignorance is strength, and freedom is slavery. War is peace sounds like a contradiction.
Better be careful with that, because Ben Carson's 2 tables away, and he'll have a shackle on your ankle while you're not looking, and then he'll be talking about he'll want to take advantage of the opportunity like he did last week and put one on Mark Morash's ankle and use that as an opportunity to promote Ivanka Trump's new line of ankle bracelets.
Well, these people are part of a cartoon. They're cartoon characters with cartoon politics. And they're more of a distraction or animation of untruth. And when you say war is peace, it seems like contradiction, but it's true. The only way we can have peace from our economic system is to have endless war. And ignorance is strength is another issue that Orwell talked about in his book. There's a lot of interest, by the way. The reason I'm bringing it up, it's on the bestseller list, 1984. 70,000 books have been published by Penguin. They can't seem to produce them fast enough. As a matter of fact, there's a movement now in some bookstores to remove 1984 from the fiction department and put it in the in the section that deals with current affairs.
Current affairs.
So but ignorance is strength is another thing. Part of what this whole procedure is to take us back to the 20s, the 1820s.
Oh, hold on. Ben Carson's yelling out something, and I can hear him. So, but he's Ben Carson.
Well, Carson made a speech a couple of days ago.
I'm gonna have to quote him because he's screaming at the top of his lungs, and it goes something like this: "Could I? Could I? Could I?" That's him screaming, by the way. So go ahead.
Well, Ben Carson he made a speech recently in which he said when he's drilling the head of a young person, he feels real good about it because he figures he can give them, 50 or 60 years of productive life. When he does it on a senior citizen, it's kind of a waste of time and money. This is the mentality of these people, and this is really ignorance is strength in the most apparent way one could, look at it. And freedom is slavery is another issue. What these people are pushing is economic freedom, but what they're really talking about is, a free-for-all, in which it's kind of social Darwinism on steroids. And this has this has been going on for years. I mean, we've had people trying to destroy the little, that's left over from the New Deal. So what we need is a Green New Deal. That's what we promote here in Connecticut. On the issue of strategy and tactics, I think what the Green Party is saying, it's okay, it's important to protest. Urgency is the word of the moment, but so is opportunity. And we need to build political parties and new political structures within our society which will build sustainable democracy and not an Orwellian nightmare.
Oh, well, I got a moment I want to quick shout out to in our audience, and she's about 10 feet away from Ben Carson, so you might have a shackle on your ankle if you don't watch out. Barbara A. Barry, co-chairperson, Green Party, and she's here off camera, on camera, in the sense that she's given us some great grist, great food for thought for our discussion. Thanks very much.
And she's done an incredible job as co-chair, and she and the other people in our group, you've had a couple of them on, like Cora and Rolf.
And Rolf Mahler,
right?
yep.
And, we really appreciate you giving us, an opportunity because, I do a radio show, and I got to tell you, quite frankly, over the last 3 years, I've discovered that freedom of speech is not free, and I'm not kidding.
Well, I'm asking
the pushback.
Continue, but I'm going to ask. I have a wish from you guys when you finish your.
Sure.
Continue.
Well, the pushback is, people don't. Suddenly, people are becoming aware after 30 years that I'm on the radio, and there's some people out here that have the sneaking suspicion that somewhere, somehow, someone is saying something that they don't like, and they want it stopped immediately. So censorship is beginning to creep into our even alternative radio programs and our alternative TV. For example, Orwell would talk about words and how they're used. He says the third purpose of war is the destruction of words. But he also talks about how words change. So even the word alternative is now being changed, and the Trump people are abrogating it and using it in ways which are contradictory to the way we've been using it for 30 years. And this is, and there's a lot of books, a lot of linguists who talk about in authoritarian societies how there's a shrinking of words, and words start to mean two different things.
So instead of alternative, it's alt.
Alt, right. But I mean, it gives a bad connotation to the word. Therefore, it becomes suspect. So now, here's one of the problems. We haven't developed a linguistic approach. Like, they're talking about regulation. We should be talking about protection. We're trying to protect the environment from these vandals. What we're trying to do is to protect society from these vicious characters who are engaged in Ponzi schemes and various attempts to defraud us. That we need this protection. That's why we need the EPA. That's why we need a true economic system that is building the future for Main Street as well as Wall Street. And I think that's the key to understanding where we're coming from and what our real position is.
One more subject.
Sure.
One more subject.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we need to talk about is the Green New Deal. And the Green, because, it's easy to protest against something, and I'm all for that. We have to come out in huge numbers against these Trump disasters. And if it hadn't been Trump, it would have been Hillary. Hillary wanted war in Syria. Hillary wanted war in the Ukraine. Right now, I would ask people to support Representative Lee's resolution, H.R. 1472. We go to war now like we're dropping
Is this state or is this federal?
The federal.
So it's Mike Lee from Utah.
No. It's
Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee
Okay.
from California.
Yep.
And she's saying, why are we invading all these countries? Yemen, Somalia, or, today in the New York Times, they talked about traditional wars and non-traditional wars.
All right.
So they say, so we have, our whole Middle East is our war place. And now we're extending it into Africa.
Big, lovely sandbox.
Well, I think what it does is it destroys these weapons, as Orwell would say, and they need to be reproduced. This is good for the war industry. We have to transition. As someone was saying here earlier, one of the issues that comes up is Pratt Whitney or Sikorsky's, they're mechanical companies. They create mechanical devices. Why couldn't they create
I
windmills?
think that's Melissa that had that thought.
Yeah.
But continue. Yeah.
And I mean, for example, a lot of people don't know, but outside of Block Island, there are now 5 huge windmills put
Yes.
in by deep water solar. I mean, deep water wind, excuse me, deep water wind.
turbines, yeah.
Turbines, and they have another project to do another 100. We could use the state bank to create the money necessary to create these. And Sikorsky's and Pratt Whitney could produce the windmills that we need. I mean, it's, you know, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Instead of making helicopters, make wind turbines.
Right. Same thing with our submarine bases.
I mean, obviously, the wind turbines, the blades are, I think, 4 times the size of the largest helicopter blade, but the same principle applies.
Well, there's 5 of them on Block Island. There's 6 megawatts each. As a matter of fact, go to YouTube, which you can find this program.
Yep,
But
thank you.
look under deep water wind,
Yeah.
and there's a whole series of programs and news flashes about this situation that is too dangerous for you to hear about on the regular news.
Yeah. Okay. My wish. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. For my dear guest and my dear off-stage guest, off-camera guest. My wish is that the Green Party, whom I love dearly, and the Working Families Party, whom I love dearly, that the two parties are sometimes a bit at odds with one another, as you well know, because we've had you and a Working Families Party representative on camera, and there's that little bit of tension. But my wish is that the Green Party and the Working Families Party, coming at life from a little different direction, but both, I think, equally good, would combine their forces, form a coalition, and kick ass on the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, Connecticut-wide and nationally.
Well, I think that's something that we need to explore. I think at the bottom of this is, the Working Families Party is a caucus within the Democratic Party or an independent party, so that has to be worked out. And there are some other issues. But certainly, we want to work with every progressive party in the world.
And with that, thank you very much, David Stevenson, Mike DeRosa, Progressive Soup. See you next Wednesday night, 9:30.
Thank you so much.